A very, very warm welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is, I think, the 29th episode of our journey through the Maitreya's text, or Asanga's text, on Buddha nature, on our 7 topics. So let's start in the very best way, remembering our bodhicitta, remembering this is the, how can you say, crème de la crème. This is the top of the top of the Mahayana teachings. It's actually what the title of the text means, and it says Uttara. Uttara means it's as far as you can go. It's the end of the end, the ultimate teaching. And so that refers us back, of course, to the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, which was the Buddha's last phase of teaching. But then this text in itself is as deep as it gets, as far as you can go with study. After that, then you need to practice. That's another story. Study is easy. So anyway, let's remember that we're doing this because we're trying to nurture our loving care for all beings. We have it, otherwise we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be connected to this wonderful text. We have it, but we don't have enough of it. Our love, our compassion needs a serious upgrade. And so we remind ourselves of that in a very nice way. At the beginning of the teachings, we try and seek out whatever true, whatever authentic care we do have for others, and to extend it and expand it and dwell inside it for the duration of this teaching as the reason why we are listening to these ideas. Otherwise, it's just ideas. It's just more idle curiosity, humanity's fascination with what is interesting. We don't want to be interesting. We want to care for our fellow beings and for ourselves. So anyway, here we go. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on till we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through our practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality, to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well. May they live long and be healthy. May they be well provided for and have good friends. May they find respect and live in places of peace, places of plenty. Most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering and attain great equanimity that's free of closeness or distance from anyone. Dayanta shame shamavati shameta shatru om kore mam kore marajite karota keyorite juwati oloyane Vishudane male malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasana omuki paramuki amuki shammedawane sawa graha bandanane grihitva Sawa bhava pravadena vimukta marapasha savitva buddhamudra anudgatita sava mare butsarita parishuddhe bigashantu sava marakamani. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So we are picking up from where we left off week before last, and seeing as we had a gap, I need to quickly zoom in to show where we are. Of all the Buddha's teachings, there are the sutras and the shastras. Sutra means whatever came directly from Buddha. Shastra means the way this Buddha's teachings were unpacked, presented, commented on by the great masters after the Buddha. Amongst the shastras, this particular shastra belongs to those related to the third and final phase of the Buddha's teaching, the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. It comes from the 5th century master Asanga, totally inspired by Buddha Maitreya, so we can see it either as coming from Maitreya or from Asanga, and it is in 3 main parts, technically three parts. The first is just the introduction and the title, is the homage. The second part is the whole body of the text, more than 400 verses. Third part is the conclusion, dedication. So we're in the main body of the text, which is itself in 2 main parts. The first, which is called the result to be achieved, which is composed of 3 Vajra chapters, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. The second part is called the cause of that result being achieved. It presents our Buddha nature, enlightenment, enlightened qualities, and enlightened activity. 7 Vajra chapters. Of those, we're in the second main part, and we've done the Buddha nature chapter. We're in the enlightenment chapter. In the enlightenment chapter, we're in the section about the manifestation of Buddha. From Buddha's side, we can also translate it as the way our mind can penetrate what Buddha is. We can call it manifestation or penetration. And in that, where we left off, we were looking at the kayas. We saw the sambhogakaya, which means the very essence of all of the different manifestations. And we saw how that's mainly composed of vimuktikaya and dharmacaya. Vimuktikaya being our own total end of the journey, freedom, the finest, most perfect, most total freedom. That's what we get. And then Dharmakaya, which is the presence of all the Dharma teachings. That's what happens for others. And then we moved on to Sambhogakaya, which is Buddha as the great bodhisattvas perceive Buddha, Buddha mind. And where we finished, we saw that has 5 main qualities. So we'll go back to that. We'll pick up the verses and these teachings. We're not finished with Sambhogakaya. After the 5 main qualities, we get 5 aspects of Sambhogakaya. The main thing to know, technically, like in our own, if you were studying this like I studied it, what you need to memorize. 5 qualities of Sambhogakaya is what you really need to know. But today, first, I'd like to, speak more generally, not speak unpacking this text verse by verse, but over the years, over the decades, I find that this topic of the kaya is hard to understand for people, and people get confused about it, or they misunderstand it easily. And often, at the heart of this, the problem, and I've mentioned it before, the problem is making the kayas into something. It's the idea you become Buddha, which means you become these three kayas, or you get these three kayas. To take a silly example, but it's like if you're in business and you become a top executive, right? You get an amazing office on the top floor. You get, because you've got that job, you get given not just a very nice car, but a chauffeur. You get a car and a chauffeur. You get a salary of £1 million a year, or whatever it is. You become chief executive officer, you get this. So then you've got Dharmacharya, sambhogakaya, nirmanakaya. They seem like things, like they're almost geographical. They feel like places, and they're far too solid. I often think of Akron Rinpoche's teachings, which always seemed so simple, but were so profound. He always used to say, you're making it too solid. And so I want to talk around that. One way or another. We hear that the kayas are, the teachings of the kayas are expressed to help us understand, but they're inseparable. So Dharmakaya is inseparable from Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya. You heard that, right? How did you understand it? Did you understand it? Did you go away and think about it and think what it means? I come back to that. The MO, the modus operandi of studying this text. It's important. It's very, very important. But something simple. Simple ways to get a handle on the kayas. We're talking about our mind. When your mind is totally liberated and you're Buddha, Dharmakaya, as we've seen it here, Svabhavikakaya, same thing, is how it is for you, what you've become. Then all the rest is how it manifests for others. Sambhogakaya, how it manifests for bodhisattvas in the 10 level. Nirmanakaya, how it manifests in the 6 realms to beings still in samsara. Okay. How it is for Buddhas, how it is for those liberated from samsara, bodhisattvas in the 10 levels, how it is for beings in samsara. When you become Buddha, how it is. Okay, that's one way. That's a very fundamental, very useful way for understanding the one and the same thing. How it is when you become enlightened. This whole chapter is about enlightenment. How it is for you, how it is for very pure beings when you become enlightened, and how it is for those you're connected with who are still in samsara. Once we've got that quite well understood, then we need to understand a huge difference. Now, although the 3 kayas are inseparable, this is something you need to take away and sit with. There's a huge difference between Dharmacharya and the other two. Dharmacharya or sambhogakaya, it doesn't matter what you call it. We're talking about what is essentially there. I'd like to give an example. Actually, when we were chatting before this talk started, I already brought it up, but I think it's an example you can understand easily. It was the example of the sun. Often that's used in these texts. The example of the sun, its light, its heat. So when we think of the sun, we think it's what? Well, I'm looking out the window now. I fix up the lighting for the zoom, right? On this side, I've got a video lamp. And on this side, I've got a window, right? It's more or less, I was just fine-tuning it before we started, equally lit up, right? This side is sunlight. We think of the sun as something that rises, it illuminates through the day, goes down over the horizon, dark. We are humans, we've got eyes, so light is something in our world. If you don't have eyes, light doesn't exist. The sun doesn't make light. We tend to think, even if I close my eyes, even if I die, the sun is making light, but it's not making light. Light is only what beings with eyes perceive, and they perceive it differently, as we know very well these days. The flying insects and so on, the way they see is not like the way we see. But no eyes, no light. You can't say the sun's radiating darkness, but it's just to show that light is only for beings with eyes. We say the sun radiates heat, but for us, heat is something that makes sense for humans because we have nerve endings. We sense heat and cold. No nerves, no heat or cold. Now that's an awful lot to think about, and it is so useful. So please go away and think about it. Look at, now I'm looking out the window, I see colors, shapes, it's a beautiful day out there, yeah? Light. Light is defined in Abhidharma as colors and shapes, is what a human sees. So then, what is the sun in itself? We can define it conceptually. We can say, well, it's a sort of nuclear explosion. That's what it really is. It's whatever's happening there with particles, which are incredibly densely, they're so densely compacted, they're messing around with each other and they're making a lot of what we call energy. But whatever the sun is, it's not producing light. If it produced light, that will be experienced by beings without eyes, by stones, by rocks. Light will be what the sun produces. It doesn't. It produces something, it just is. But for us humans, it produces light and heat. Does that make sense? The sun isn't light, the sun isn't heat. It is whatever it is. But for us humans, it is so vital. If it stops shining, we've got no more sunlight, we're in trouble. If it's not producing what for us becomes heat, we're in trouble. For us, it's important. For us, it's what the sun is. Before we knew about its nuclear nature and all of that, going back thousands of years, the sun which rises and gives light and gives heat. It's very, very important for us humans. So when we say sambhogakaya or Dharmacharya, what we become when we become enlightened, we say you can't imagine it, because you can't imagine it. You just can't. Not it's hard to imagine, not most people can imagine it. What the text says is you can't imagine it. So when we were looking at Vimuktikaya, we can only look at what is not, what's finished. Your anger is finished, your mind poisons are finished, your conceptual mind is finished. We look at everything that goes, but nobody can tell you what it is. So when we look at Dharmakaya, what you become, sometimes it said you're like a drop of water going back in the ocean. What you become is forever. That's the point I'm making here. Dharmakaya, sambhogakaya, whichever way you choose to call it. What you become when you become fully enlightened is you've ended. You've become the everything, however you want to think of it, even though you can't think of it, because it's inconceivable. But however you like to think of it that's helpful, you become the everything. Your story's finished forever. You've become what is changeless, the true nature of mind that we looked at a bit in the Buddha Nature chapter that we're exploring. And that's forever. That's you've become what always was, what always is, that's changeless. But the other two kayas, how other people will perceive Buddha Ken, Buddha you, when you become it, that is, they are temporary. They last, and then they're gone. And the whole story of Ken the person, Ken the bodhisattva, Buddha Ken who got enlightened and manifested, finished everything. So sambhogakaya activity, nirmanakaya activity, last only for a certain amount of time, then they're gone. That's why we talk about the Buddhas of the past. And we talk in the Buddha's own story. We say he first gave rise to bodhicitta when he met the previous Buddha, when that previous Buddha was active. When he met that previous Buddha's nirmanakaya, took the bodhisattva vow. So what you've got to do is get your head around that Dharmakaya, sambhogakaya, we're going to the timeless essence that dissolved into space. In the Mahamudra teaching, it says, like steam from a geyser, these in Iceland and other places, these places where steam comes out the ground, so powerful, and then that powerful push of steam gone into space as it goes up, gone forever. Your samsara, you, the story of Ken, thousands of lifetimes, gone. So we need to get our head round sambhogakaya, nirmanakaya. We're talking about how your enlightenment impacts others for a certain amount of time. Next step, then what's this thing about the simultaneity of the three kayas, the inseparability? Well, of course it has to be like that, because your impact on others, which is, what is it? giving them Dharma teachings. That's what sambhogakaya, nirmanakaya is about, helping others along the path. Of course that's simultaneous from Dharmacharya, because that's where all that help comes from. It's your clarity of mind. Total clarity of mind. Interacting with people's confusion. Helping them on their way. But you see, this simultaneity, this inseparability of the three kayas, that's why they say it's like space. Things come and go in space. No space, they can't happen. So that's something for you to think about. Does that make sense? I hope it helps a bit understanding these three kayas. We're not talking about something material, solid that you get when you become Buddha. When you become Buddha, your story is finished. You're released, but that has a huge impact on others. This is what we're looking at in Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya. We're in the middle of Sambhogakaya, talking about the impact on bodhisattvas. Now, how that works is not easy to explain. It becomes easier when we do study in detail the 10 bodhisattva levels and what goes on. But even then is when we study them in detail, because you can go through the 10 bodhisattva levels in, for instance, Gampopa's teaching. You won't study the 80 key qualities that are developed in the 10 bodhisattva levels. Right? So when we study Abhidharma, Mahayana Abhidharma, we study the 80 key qualities developed in Abhidharma. And one of them, which becomes very important for Vajrayana, is called the power of Dharani. It goes together. There are two qualities we study together when we do that. It is what is usually translated as courage. Bodhisattva courage. Although when you get into what it really is, it's not really courage. But anyway, courage is the literal translation, is the term. Courage and Dharani. Dharani means almost the same as mantra. But Dharani, are mantras which appear in the sutra teachings. Like when I start the session, I get all kind of solemn, and I make this teaching mudra, and I go Deyata Shame Shamavati Shamita Shatru Om Kut, like that. That comes from the sutra teachings. It's not a Vajrayana mantra related to a deity. It's from the sutra teachings given by Buddha Shakyamuni about how a Dharma teacher should teach, how you should do that particular dharani to protect the people who are listening from negative influences. So dharani are mantras. You can say it means mantra. So when we look at what bodhisattvas develop amongst their 80 qualities, one of them is dharani. And as you develop that through the Pure Lands of what happens in the bodhisattva levels, by remaining within the dharani, let's give a simple mantra example from Vajrayana, Om Mani Padme Hum. Then the benefit to other beings happens. Your mind is inside Om Mani Padme Hum. Very purely, totally with Chinrezig. And through that, the people you're connected to get benefit. This is the sort of basic principle of dharani. By putting your mind deep in meditation, other people get benefit. It's curious. It's not you go out there and help people. Huh? It's you go in here and help people. Compassionate activity. So these two, how they work, how they interact, how the one inspires the other, how the one becomes the other through the 10 bodhisattva levels, it's a very profound topic. It's called dharani. So if you understand that, going deeper and deeper inside, and how that can benefit those with whom you have a karmic connection, then you can understand that at the end of the process, you've disappeared, but the power of all of your prayers and dharani and meditation through the 10 bodhisattva levels is going to continue to benefit others, even though you're gone. Now, this is a deep topic. Okay, now I meant to say a few things this morning. I've said most of them before we go back to the verses. I've not forgotten the verses, but I think this is helpful for understanding them. Now, the last point is, how do you study this? How do we study this text? It's an opportunity to grow. And what do I want to say? I want to say, if you study it properly, it will challenge your ego. Because when you study, you are arrogant, or most of us are arrogant. If you've either done university studies or higher studies, or even if you've been in business, people who are in business, who are in politics, they get other people to do them reports, and then they want a summary of the report. If it's 40 pages, they want it on 1 page, or give it to me in half a page. You want to say, I know that. Or you want to boil the information down in a way that suits you, so that then you can incorporate it to expand your linear knowledge. Now, it's quite interesting, and I hope I'm not deviating too much from this course. You didn't pay, it's all free of charge, so you can't ask for your money back. Right? This is what happens when it's free of charge. You have to put up with me. Okay, so what you should really do when you study this text is sit with it. Like last time, when the last teaching, we had 5 points of sambhogakaya. Can you remember them? Probably not. You don't even know the titles. Did you sit down and think about them and dwell with them and let them become deeper, let's say? Let them really speak to your bones and your DNA? No. You wanted it in half a page. You wanted it in terms you can cope with. You wanted to be able to tell yourself, I've got that now. You wanted the simple version. Why have we got 440 verses to tell us about this simple nature of who we are? Each one of these verses, when you study as you're supposed to study, is the beginning of sitting down and letting the meaning of that verse. So it says the 5 qualities. The first one was that it only teaches when bodhisattvas experience sambhogakaya, it only teaches Mahayana. So what does that mean? When we sit down and think about it, is it sectarian? Did it exclude the Theravada teachings or the Shravaka teachings? Is it just specialized study? What is Mahayana? What's happening when bodhisattvas experience sambhogakaya? It's only Mahayana because all the time their heart is open. To get to first bodhisattva level, something has to flip from self-centeredness being the priority to caring for others being the priority. This open-hearted care for everybody. Everybody becomes you. You feel like everybody. They're suffering. You feel it. You're desperate to help. Their happiness, you want so much to bring it everywhere. The me bits disappeared through all the work on the path up to first bodhisattva level. So it means, what can beings who are only in the company of other bodhisattvas, others who care like them, others as open as they are, others whose meditation has settled their minds so perfectly, what sort of teachings can those kind of hearts and mind receive? This is when it says the Mahayana. It's not Mahayana, blah, 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 Nagarjuna this, It's not that meaning of Mahayana teachings. It means the teachings that the perfect love of Buddha gives to the wonderful love of the bodhisattvas. How to really care. And then we see the paramitas, they come to life. It's like if you see a bulb in the ground come and become a flower. The beauty of generosity. How pure right conduct is, and how corrupt worldly conduct is. It's the real essence of the paramitas. Meditation paramita. How wonderful a mind which is calm and not troubled by anger and jealousy, and more than that, how wonderful a mind which has so many powers and qualities, and special qualities, miraculous qualities, through meditation. The reality of that, not words about it, blah, 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 Mahayana teachings. The transmission of the wonderful beauty of all the paramitas, the necessity, and how deep and how fine they go. So this is what you do if you took that verse and you sat down and thought about, what does it mean they only receive the Mahayana teachings? This is the speech aspect. And we take all 5 points. The next point, the body aspect. They only experience with what their 5 senses have become. Buddhas, bodhisattvas, purity, pure lands, everything is pure. How can that be? How is it now for me? How is... I won't tell you about my day, but I've already had quite a long day before this teaching, part of which involves purifying enemas. I don't know if you know what enemas are, right? But what is the experience? What do we experience in our world? What do we see? What do you see on the news? The violence, the treachery, the greed, and all these things. We sit down and we think, and we let it settle and try and imagine. They only experience what's pure. When we say pure lands, it's not It's not like a luxury cruise. It's not like going to the Deva realms. It's not like having a good time. It means it's pure. What they experience is only the purity of mind. Now, that challenges your ego. Because like I said, many people, you want to think, I've understood. You want to take notes and think, I've got it in my notebook. I can always come back to that, but you can't take your notebooks in the bardo. They're gone. Somebody's going to throw them away or wonder, what the hell am I going to do with Ken's stuff? Now he's dead. So much paperwork, so many recordings and everything. So I think back on Rinpoche's teaching about being humble. And being humble is not going around sort of shriveled up. It means this ability where you want to learn directly and to accept that you don't know and that your mind wants to open. And I think it's wonderful. Some of you are following Taisitupa's teachings at the moment on Ganges Mahamudra. And he talked about, in the last session and the session before, big mind. First he talked about a seeing, that our eyes see just in front, but then he made these wonderful gestures like a gyroscope. You see like 360 degrees all around and 360 degrees that way. Your mind is open. It's I think Trungpa said panoramic awareness. And then in the last session, he talked about one-dimensional understanding for beginners and how that becomes three-dimensional. We learn to understand things from many angles at the same time. This is how we should study this text. Don't let your ego say, yes, I know that, I've got that now, because you understood words. Sit with each idea and allow that to help you grow. Try and feel it, try and sense it, explore it. So anyway, that's enough of me talking about this section that we're in and about studying it. So we were in Sambhogakaya and we saw what are called the 5 key qualities, which is what we need to know and explore. So that finished with verse 216, 217, and then my explanation covered verse 218, although I don't know if I actually said it. No. So let's do 218. It is shown here in 5 facets, those of uninterrupted speech, emanations and deeds, through the fact that these are not at all contrived and do not manifest its true identity. So that's summing up the explanation. And I think I explained that point by point. That's on page 219. And on page 219, we've got verse 219. And says, just as a gem is not really the various hues it can assume, so likewise the all-embracing mind is not as it appears to be through the circumstances of various beings. So that's about verse 219 is how sambhogakaya manifests according to circumstances. Circumstances. So what does it mean here, circumstances? It means, the mind of the bodhisattva. 2nd level bodhisattva, 5th level bodhisattva. It is their circumstances. Very hard for us to imagine. But like just now, if we take this verse, sit down with it, let it become a teacher for us. Put it on a throne, the words, the ideas of this verse, sit in front of it like it's a teacher, prostrate to it and feel, what have I got to learn from this verse? And then, so you had according to circumstances. So then what can we think? What are my circumstances? How do I learn Dharma in my circumstances? Well, I go online on a Saturday morning, I listen to Ken. Maybe you went online yesterday, Friday, listened to Taisitupa. What are my circumstances? How much can I practice it? How much time do I get to actually study this, to think about it? How does it fit with my meditation? How does it fit with who I am? Is studying Dharma a sort of a duty that the good bit of myself forces me to do? But I really like going to the 10-pin bowling alley and, that's my real treat. Or is like Dharma the treat moment of my week? Examine your own circumstances and think, according to my circumstances, what Dharma do I have access to? How am I receiving it? How is it impacting me? How is it changing me? So there, from exploring our own circumstances, we can then think, here we're talking about sambhogakaya, manifested bodhisattvas in the 10th level. What are their circumstances? They're still somebody. They're a very beautiful somebody, but they're still somebody, and until they're 100% enlightened, their story is unique. So each one's different, and according to their circumstances, sambhogakaya will manifest what they need. In the morning, before I start the teaching, what they call it in English, nice word, I groom myself, right? I shave my whiskers. Under here, I trim the moustache. I use a mirror and a razor. So the mirror gives me just what I want, the reflection of these hairs. It's a magnifying mirror. It's a shaving mirror, So I've got this huge moustache in the mirror and an electric razor, and I'm cutting the edge there. Very easy to get it wrong. Once I got it very wrong, I took off half the moustache and couldn't really be in public for a week or two. The mirror gives me what I want according to my circumstances of shaving. Could be other circumstances. It will give me something else. Each bodhisattva, where they are in this moment, according to their circumstances. Now, how do they experience? They have purified 5 senses. They see Buddhas. They hear Buddhas. They actually smell the purity of Buddhas, which is an amazing smell, it says, like nothing else. They feel the loving care of the Buddhas as like blissful presence. So we take that verse away, we think about it. And it says, the all-embracing is not as it appears to be through the circumstances of various beings. So if you take what I said earlier about the sun, for us it's light, it's heat. For our planet it's gravity, keeping it moving round, keeping it where it is. Fortunately, if the sun's gravitational pull varied, we'd suddenly freeze or we'd burn up. All those things it is for us, it isn't in itself. It just is. Whatever that is going on in there. So like that for beings, for these bodhisattvas, it's not what it appears to be. So now we come on to the nirmanakaya. We've finished there what we can study about sambhogakaya, but there is just so much to take away and contemplate on. So now nirmanakaya, nirmana means emanations. And this is how beings in the 6 realms, now we're looking at beings in samsara, going in a very linear, limited way, from one existence to the next. In one moment, your mind can only do one thing at a time, in a split second. This is samsara. The bodhisattvas have very open, multiple minds. We have one after another, linear, one-dimensional experience. How can we experience nirmanakaya? Now, not in this text. We're going to leave this text before we go into the verses. So I can tell you in general what we find in other scriptures about nirmanakaya. We get 3, 4, 5 main ways in which beings like us in the 6 realms, still subject to reincarnation because of the power of karma, how we can experience, how we can interact with. And that's what this section's about, interpenetration. How Buddha can get into our life, how our lives can penetrate what Buddha is. It's about interpenetration. How can that happen? Now we've got a very good word in English these days from, I think it's from computing, interface. Huh? You know this word interface. What can be the interface between us and enlightenment where we are? And we see several. So the first one is called Supreme Nirmanakaya. That's what we're going to look at in this text only. Supreme Nirmanakaya is when a Buddha comes to the world, like Sakyamuni, and teaches the Dharma where it doesn't exist, establishes the Dharma, teaches it well enough, long enough, properly enough, that the Dharma carries on in that world for thousands of years. So that coming of a Buddha to the world is called Supreme Nirmanakaya, supreme emanation. That's the best. That's the best interface. So we missed it. Well, maybe not. I mean, we don't know who we were 2,500 years ago. Maybe you were there. You know? Maybe you were a mosquito drinking the blood of the bodhisattvas, listening to the Buddha, but you made a good connection. So we can't really say. But just now, it's like when you see an arrow that misses the target. We're 2,600 years too late, and you know, when most of us not in India, right? So we're geographically in time and space. Whoops. We're not meeting. You can't go, no matter how much money you've got, you can't go to Buddha Shakyamuni. Those 45 years in which he taught were golden, glorious time. And it says the power of that time for a century or more after he taught made something very, very, they call it the golden era of the Buddha's teaching. So that's Supreme Nirmanakaya. The second type of Nirmanakaya is what in Tibetan Buddhism they call tulkus, which means emanated masters, gurus, those who embody and teach the Dharma very, very properly. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's not everyone who is called tulku. I talked about this before. I've talked about it a few times. Not according to Ken, according to my very best teachers. You know, Tibetan tulku system became very corrupt. Maybe only 1 in 15, 1 in 20 is an authentic reincarnation of the person, the great master they're supposed to be. That whole system went pear-shaped. But still, the 1 in 15, they're wonderful. We shouldn't throw away the 1 in 15 because of the other 14. We should seek out the 1 in 15. It's very important. Otherwise you say, I can't be bothered, because that whole system got corrupt. Then you're missing a wonderful opportunity. So we should know that there's a lot of people with fantastic looking CVs who aren't what they're made out to be. In the Tibetan system, it's what happened to it. It's a shame, but that's the way it is. But nevertheless, we have the amazing teachers that we've had, and we still have. So these ones, and then if you study Gampopa, it tells you what are their qualities. We can have it as 2 qualities, 4 qualities, 8 major qualities we should look for in a teacher. But the 2 qualities, the simple version, is not only they teach authentic Dharma, but their whole being embodies authentic Dharma. They're walking the talk. They are the living presence of what they're talking about. So these human Dharma teachers, they're not the supreme nirmanakaya, which teaches the Dharma for the first time in the world. These teachers are just giving us what the Buddha's already taught. They're not making up something new themselves. If they do, be careful. They should be presenting to us what Buddha taught. But they're human, they're available, they can appear in our lives if our karma is good enough. Again, remember this phrase, according to your circumstances. Sometimes we get a few minutes with a being like that, sometimes a few days. And then I remember looking at the assistants of the 16th Karmapa and thinking, gosh, they're with him all the time, every day. For years and years. In Sherabling, Taisitupa's attendant, Gegenla, I think he's 102 now. He's been with Taisitupa all his life. He's an amazing, amazing person. He's called Gegenla. Gegen means teacher. He taught Taisitupa to read, to write. And so that's just amazing, according to circumstances. But it means in terms of the interface, we can meet authentic teachers who teach and who embody pure Dharma. That's amazing. That's the second type. There's a third type who are great benefactors to the world, but not religious teachers. So they can appear, it says, as good people, humanitarians, sometimes as scientists who bring knowledge to the world, medicine, great doctors. They're not necessarily teaching formal Dharma, but they are benefiting the world in a way which helps it in a time. And in countries where there isn't Dharma, or that would resist Dharma as a religion, Buddhism, they can still come and help people. They can still come and bring new medical knowledge, new scientific knowledge, new knowledge how to grow crops, irrigate the land. These are emanations, nirmanakaya, nirmana, emanations, where the Buddha mind works through somebody to bring something to humanity, a human being. And then there's a fourth area which isn't through human beings, and it can happen through nature, through texts. This happens to many people. One day they're out with nature, and all of a sudden it's like their mind opens up, their heart opens up, and it's transformative. It changes their life. They feel like the universe has spoken to them or God has spoken to them. This is what we're talking about. Some profound, meaningful message, which in its essence conveys what the Dharma teaches us, but it's not necessarily in the blah, blah, blah of formal Dharma teachings. It just happens to you all alone with nature. Or if it's not all alone with nature, it can be all alone with a text, a religious text, a sacred text can all of a sudden come to life. This has happened to me. You read the words and all of a sudden, it's not just words on a page anymore. It's going right into you. It's breaking through all your ego barriers, and it's gone right down into the marrow of your bones, changing your life. So there's that kind of emanation. And the last one is sort of to cover all possibilities. It's called various. So it can be anything, really, that connects you more with the truth of who you are, the truth of everything, with what we studied under Buddha nature, in the Buddha nature chapter. So in other places, when we're looking at nirmanakaya, we see those 5 types of nirmanakaya. In this text, we're only looking at supreme nirmanakaya. So this is when a Buddha comes to a world. Now, by the time this text was written, we are what? We are hard to count. We are at least 1,000 years after the Buddha. A lot of Buddhism has happened. A lot. In India, in other countries. People have thought about the Buddha's teaching. Huge monastic universities are emerging. People are really wanted to talk, to understand, to go deeper, to think, what does this mean? What does this imply? And Mahayana Buddhism has emerged very widely. And where Asanga, the author of this text, was in Kashmir, was one of the places where the Buddha's teaching were really fully flourishing, in full bloom. So at the time, what they thought, and that's up to you to think about it, was that when Buddha manifested in our world as Prince Siddhartha, and Buddha Shakyamuni, Prince Siddhartha, at the same time, in many other parallel worlds, the numbers in the text is roughly a billion other inhabited planets, a similar thing happens. And the story is always similar. And there are 12 important things that happen in the life of that Buddha when the Buddha comes and gives the Dharma teaching. So these are called the 12 deeds of the Buddha. And I had a lovely time with Taisitupa in the 1980s. And we were making Dharma practices in English, because people said, why do we have to do it in Tibetan? We don't understand a word. And so we were making simple Dharma practices in English. And then also he wanted a praise to the 12 deeds of the Buddha in English that we could sing. So we formed a small choir, and it was up to us to make the music, and he wanted to give the main ideas and for me to put them into words. So we made this, it sounds a bit churchy, but we made this 12 deeds of the Buddha praise. And the idea was it would be done often in Samiling and other centers, but somehow none of these things ever caught on, either the practices he made in English or this 12 deeds of the Buddha. So let's start looking at them. I thought I'd get so much further today, but well, I just rabbit on and on and on. So first thing, 12 deeds. 12. First thing to put in, 12. Buddha's life, we have lots of versions of Buddha's life, some of them. So here we're looking at 12 key points. The whole point of the Buddha, the Supreme Nirmanakaya, is to establish Dharma properly, well, lastingly. So these 12 key points are about doing that. And when we think of the life of the Buddha, now we've studied this, or once we've studied this, should think of it in that way. The whole point is to bring Dharma well to the world. So, and these verses are so beautiful. I mean, for me anyway, I find them so beautiful. So page 221, verse 220. Through great compassion, knowing all worlds, having seen all worlds, while never leaving the Dharmacaya, through various forms, apparitional by nature, the one excellently born into the highest birth. Okay, this is the introduction to the 12 deeds. Who are we talking about? Buddha, who is enlightened, but now we're looking at nirmanakaya, right? So, through the greatest compassion, knowing all worlds. Having seen all worlds while never leaving the Dharmacaya. There's so much in each of these lines when you sit down and let them become real for you. And it is something I wanted to talk about today. And it is the most difficult topic. So I'm telling you now, I'm going to talk about it. And it's not that I understand it. And you're not going to understand it. But I've got to talk about it. Now, not only do I not understand it, and you won't understand it, but even the greatest Tibetan Buddhist masters don't agree about it, right? So if they can't agree, what the hell are we going to do, right? So it's about compassion. What the hell is compassion? For us, it's easy. We're in a simple, linear mind, and we know when we feel compassion for somebody. We know when we meet a compassionate person. We feel compassion on our level. That's wonderful. It's straightforward. You don't need to be a genius. Compassion on our level, what is it? But then as we grow through the path, and as we become a great bodhisattva, first level, second level, when now you become Buddha, what is compassion? I'm looking at a mosquito that's after my hand, right? What is compassion? This friendly little creature comes along, all right? So I'm not going to splat it. I'm going to understand its need for my blood. And I remember once in Zimbabwe, we were in the old Harare shrine room, and it was mosquito time. And I was sitting there, and Seringtashi Rinpoche's nephew was there. It was hot, so he had the tiniest Tibetan waistcoat on and a lot of flesh. And we're sitting there in Rinpoche's teaching next to each other, and all these little black things are landing on him. And we're having such a sort of laugh with our eyes because he's kind of like this, and I'm looking at him and saying, yeah, and it's just an offering of blood and pain. So on our level, compassion, it's easy to understand. What was it? What I just talked about? An interaction between me and a mosquito, right? It was my caring for it, not wanting it to suffer, because I'm a human and humans usually kill mosquitoes and so on. So not wanting it to suffer from not being able to mate because it's not got any blood in its body and so whatever. Compassion has a focus. Compassion is temporary because it has a focus. This is the situation. You care for it. You do some compassionate activity. Somebody's hungry. You give them food. Whatever. So if you become the everything, when your mind becomes Dharmacaya, which never changes, how can changelessness coexist with changing circumstances? Oh, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. How can a changeless, timeless state that's always been have compassion when the triggers for compassion are impermanent situations? And then, if it's a mind that's omniscient and knows everybody and everything, what is 1,000 billion compassions at the same time like? Does it make any sense? What sense can you make of it? What happens when you become Buddha? It says your mind is free of suffering. But if it's omniscient and aware of trillions upon trillions of beings' incredible suffering, how have you gone beyond suffering? Have you gone into a state of awareness of, I don't know, as a human being, sometimes one person's pain is more than we can take. We have to retreat. So you've got every single sentient being throughout time and space that ever was and that ever will be, and you're plunged into their suffering because you're omniscient. How does it work? In fact, do you want to become Buddha? Do you want to be plugged into the suffering that's everywhere in all the different realms? So about this, great minds do not agree. And this simultaneity of the three kayas and so on becomes a big topic. What happens at enlightenment? What does it mean? What are these emanations? Where do they come from? What is compassion in that case? It's an awful lot to think about, but we need to start here. It's not a topic that's going to go away. It's not going to go away. It's going to become more and more present, and we're going to become more and more liberated in our understanding of it. Primarily through meditation, but also there's all the stages of the path. And that's what brings the answers. Not a, boff, here's the answer. This is the Buddha's compassion. And you can write it down in a half page and you've understood it. Sorry, that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And the arguments of Tsongkhapa and the Karmapas and the masters, Sakya Pandita, the great teachers who've not agreed about this. It takes a huge mind to get your head around even where they disagree. and what they're saying. But it's not a topic that's going to go away, but by understanding step by step what happens on the path, it makes more sense. And then through your own meditation practice, when your own mind settles and your own compassion changes because of shamatha, because of vipassana, because of Mahamudra meditation, because of Chinresi practice, Tara practice, as your own mind changes and your relationship with people, your compassion changes, then it starts to make more sense. Then it becomes fascinating. It's really a most fascinating story because it's about the truth of yourself, of everyone, and what we want to become in order to help other beings. So this verse is the introduction. Through the greatest compassion that knows all worlds. Now this is not about cosmic geography. Knowing all worlds means knowing the world that each being is in. Like here we've got 33 participants in our Zoom. 33 different worlds. Now I'm sorry Ken doesn't know all your worlds. I know some of you a little bit. But when it says knowing all worlds, it means knowing life from the inside for each and every sentient being. Through the greatest compassion, knowing all worlds. Does that make more sense now? These lines are incredible. And having seen all worlds, not just knowing what's going on, but direct witnessing through all those bodhisattva levels and becoming Buddha, while never leaving the Dharmacaya. You know, it's not like Ken never leaving France. Never leaving the Dharmacaya is about the Buddha's, what we would call mind. It doesn't need to leave that primordial, changeless, timeless purity in order to help beings. The meaning of that line is where you get all these profound disagreements by the greatest Buddhist teachers in Tibet, while never leaving the Dharmacaya. Knowing Ken's mind, Buddha knows my mind, right? Does Buddha's mind have to leave the timeless, changeless, perfect peace, perfection, in order to know what's going on in Ken's mind? It is huge. Ah, dear. Or never leaving the Dharmakaya through various forms, apparitional by nature. Oh, there's a lot to think about there too. What's an apparition? What's an apparition? Something that appears, but that's not what it seems to be. Like a mirage. Looks like you see something on the horizon, and there's nothing there. Through various forms, apparitional by nature, the one excellently born into the highest birth. But this last line, so this is the Mahayana version of enlightenment, right? You go through the 10 bodhisattva levels, and at the end of the 10th bodhisattva level, when that bit of the journey is finished, where you reach enlightenment, surprisingly, is called, however it was pronounced, akantha, heaven. It just means highest. It's the Sanskrit word for highest. Where you reach enlightenment is in the highest state. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? So, but if you look at the word, then it's this akanistha or akantha. Just the Sanskrit word for highest, but it's when we go through the different Deva realms and sublime realms, is the highest of the highest. That's where Buddha gets enlightened. Not on planet Earth, under the Bodhi tree, all of a sudden all the lights go on and he's got it. As in the story, Buddha in the Mahayana version goes through the 10 bodhisattva levels, and in the most purest, wonderful state, there's the final dissolution into the everything. And there, in terms of words and theory, it gets a little bit complicated. Because, and you must be exhausted by now, because, but anyway, just a little bit more. Okay. Dharmacharya, sambhogakaya, nirmanakaya. But then there's the Dharmacharya of the Dharmacharya and the sambhogakaya of the Dharmacharya and the nirmanakaya of the Dharmacharya. Just as there is the Dharmacharya of the sambhogakaya and the sambhogakaya of the sambhogakaya and the nirmanakaya of the sambhogakaya, and the Dharmacharya of the nirmanakaya, the sambhogakaya of the nirmanakaya, and the nirmanakaya of the nirmanakaya. And you can go further. So, although at the end of if we go back to Sakyamuni's story, where enlightenment was reached was in the very, very highest state called the Akantha heaven, Sambhogakaya, then there is a Sambhogakaya of that Sambhogakaya, which is that one of the millions of emanations of that Bodhisattva Shakyamuni, one of them, the one that came to our world, was in a heaven called Tushita. A Bodhisattva on the 10th level has endless emanations. One of them was in Tushita, so that was a Sambhogakaya of a Sambhogakaya in Tushita, so that's this verse, right? It's the introduction to the 12 deeds. And then, so what happened to this highest of beings with the omniscience, who'd experienced everybody's mind, who was enlightened in the highest heaven, but had an emanation in Tushita? From the Tushita emanation, there was a 5-fold realization. Meaning, basically, time to emanate on earth. So we get, this is the first deed, it's the realizing that the time had come. The time had come to bring Dharma to this world. So the first deed is realizing that the world is ready. So we'll just go through that quickly and come back to it next time. Page 222. There are 5 things which are right. This is the 5-fold realization. The place was right. Our world, planet Earth, with the people who've been reborn in it at the time, or who were about to be reborn, it was the right place. Now, in particular, where he would take birth, northern India, was the right place, because it's a place from which Dharma could spread. It was civilized. I think if you look at Western Europe at the time of Buddha, it was a bit savage. It wouldn't have been the best place. When you go back to India, you go back a few thousand years BC, they had the Mohenjo-daro civilization, Harappans and so on. They had, it was a very civilized place. Technically, they had cities with main drainage, organization, councils. It was very, very technically civilized because there were spiritual beings who were respected, philosophers, People valued knowledge, they valued mathematics, astrology, and so on. It was, and also geographically, it was a place from which the teachings could spread. As we see through history, they did spread all over Asia, and then later to here. So the place was right. There was an advanced civilization. Secondly, the time was right. And here we're looking, it talks about human lifespan. It says was roughly 100 years. Now, that way of calculating is an old-fashioned way. It's not 100 of our solar years, but it doesn't matter. What it means is this, looking at the clock. When the lifespan's so long, human beings are dharma lazy. They've got all the time in the world. They don't have impermanence, death, the fact that you've not got long, to urge them to study Dharma, to practice Dharma, to take it very seriously, because life ain't that long. So when life is too long, it becomes like the Deva realms, where Dharma study is kind of it's a luxury, it's a good thing to do, but it doesn't have so much impact. If the lifespan is too short, even if you get the Dharma teachings, you don't have enough time to really make progress. Before you're dead, you're reborn. You need to learn all the basic skills of being human again. You get a bit more Dharma. If life's too short, you don't have enough time to take yourself forward. So this is what the second point means. The lifespan of the humans who would receive the Dharma was long enough and short enough. It was short enough that our mortality is a driving inspiration to get us to practice. And we have, if we apply ourselves to practice, we have enough time. So that's the second thing. Time was right. It means about human lifespan. So when we look at the bigger picture of the cosmos, compost. Maybe that's what the universe is, a giant cosmos, compost even. Yeah, then human lifespan goes down to a very short time. The environments, the pits, there are so many diseases, there's so much horrid warfare going on. So anyway, it's that. Third point, the entourage. This is the most important thing. All the key beings that Bodhisattva Shakyamuni had made contact with over so many hundreds of lifetimes, they were all gathering. They'd already been born, or they were about to be born, and Buddha's mind from Tushita heaven could sense this gathering of those who will be ready and worthy to receive his teachings, because there was wonderful connection from past lives. So the entourage, means who will be his disciples, was correct. And then very practically, there was a suitable mother capable of bearing such a child and looking after that child properly in terms of mastery of her own emotions and being able to carry such a presence within her. So when we go back to past lives, we see the story of Mahamaya, Buddha's birth mother, how she was a bodhisattva, very close to the Buddha, and she made a promise when you become Buddha, I want to be your mum, right? And had all the qualities to be able to do that. He saw the mother, and he saw that then number 5, the caste of the parents was suitable, the parents' social situation. So according to, this is very debated by scholars, quite how big a deal were his parents. They're called kings and queens. How big was their kingdom? How much power they had? There's a lot of debate about all of that. But basically, it means that he would be respected. So it says in different human civilizations, sometimes it's the warlords, it's the warriors who are the most respected. In others, it's the most scholarly, which usually translates as the Brahmins, the scholars, the religious philosophers, and so on, who are the most respected. Buddha's message was going to spread through many different kingdoms. The fact that he was a prince and respected by the kings and queens of the other kingdoms was very important. So we leave it there for today. We've not done many verses, but we've covered quite a lot of material, I hope, that will be useful to you. May whatever virtue was created by our session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. By the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by their waves of rebirth, aging, sickness and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. In those in whom it has arisen, may its development know no setbacks. May it increase ever more and more. Through our virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you very, very much. Your turn.
Hi, Ken. Thank you very much for today's teachings. It was very good. Excellent. We didn't get through many verses, but I think that's fine because what did come across was how extraordinary all these 440 verses are. I mean, each one is only 4, 5, 6 or whatever lines. But within those few lines, it's amazing what they talk about or teach. And one could spend probably a lifetime on one verse and get deeper and deeper into it. So the whole text is just extraordinary. One thing is that you mentioned the attendant of Tai Si Tupa and how they'd never been part. It did remind me of a time when they actually were apart, but it's a funny anecdote about Dublin. But I'll say it if nobody else has any other things to say more relevant to today.
Well, I think you should continue for a moment.
Yeah. Carry on, Neil.
Okay, so his attendant was in Dublin at the Dublin Centre. I can't remember, probably the 1990s or so. It was when 16th Karmapa was in Hong Kong in hospital. And Tai Si Tupa was due to come, but he had to stay in Hong Kong. So his attendant and one or two others arrived in Dublin first. So they were separated for a while. And I remember when I collected Tai Si Tupa at the airport and drove up, and when I drove up in the car outside the centre, it was a bit like a greyhound when the traps go up. The front door of the centre opened, and the attendant ran out. And the meeting was incredible. And subsequent to that, they were just like children. I told the story about before about when I took them to buy a pair of shoes for Taisi Tupa, and I think I've told that. So unless people want to hear it again, I mentioned. But it was extraordinary how he just couldn't bear to be before Taisi Tupa arrived, he was all sort of agitated, the fact that Taisi Tupa wasn't there.
Yeah.
It's just the speed at which he came out the door was amazing.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, there were three of them, three attendants who traveled with him. It depends which trip it was. Two of them still alive. That's amazing. And still totally connected to him. Tenam Shastri and Gegenla. The third one, Sewong Nobu, he was already quite old and unwell. He died in the meantime. But their closeness, their synergy was just amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah.
Ken, I had a question about you've been mentioning Tai Sintu Rinpoche's teachings quite a number of times. Is there a link to that I can try to connect with?
Yeah, I can
You could
send it
email
to
it to me
you.
later.
It's Wisdom organization. It's Wisdom Publications who've made another wisdom thing. They put on lectures. They've had Kalu Rinpoche do some, and now Taisitupa's doing a series, 5 talks, 5 teachings on the Ganges Mahamudra. And so
I can
yesterday,
never get past the first line. He says, in space, what is resting on what? And
yeah.
then that's it. I don't go beyond that.
Well, you maybe stay there. I mean, there's a lot to learn
Yeah,
from it. But
that's
it's a pay-for course. You pay for it, and you can only go on to lesson 2 once you've ticked the boxes that you've read the text, you've gone through the whole video teaching. There's a quiz where you have to answer questions, and when all of that's okay, you're allowed to go on to the next one. Right?
oh, it's very formal.
That's how they do it. It's very good.
Yeah.
So, and although it was number 3 yesterday, I think you could still join up for
Oh,
it.
if it's all that work, then you probably have recordings.
Yeah, it's
And the
recorded.
other thing I wanted to mention is you could also share that song of the 12 deeds of the Buddha. I know you share songs on
I will do.
YouTube.
I will do. No, what I'll do, what I was thinking of doing today, I didn't get as far as I thought I'd get. But like we go through the 12 deeds one by one, and then with each deed, there's a verse. And
Yeah.
so I'll share at least the words of the verse, and if I'm up to it, I'll even sing it. But let's see how we get on with that. I might
And I
have a recording
want,
of better voices than mine singing it.
and I wanted to emphasize again and again that hearing it from you is a blessing in itself. That your Western background, your Western understanding, your immersion into the Dharma, and bringing it to us in the vocabulary and concepts that we know is the great step of spreading the Dharma. That's so wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
So live
Very
long and
kind.
prosper.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying. I'm trying.
We're on your side. Anything you need.
Can I add a question about the different kinds of presentation of nirmanakaya that can arise? I counted 5 that you mentioned. The last 2, you said that it can arise in the form of, for example, nature or in texts. And then the second one, you said in various. I'm just wondering what the difference is, because for me, nature is various. Do you see what I mean?
No, it means in various. It's. I mean, these lists they come from scholars, right? So numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. we can understand. But then they say they know there's more than that. So they make a fifth category. Various means anything else. And it could be, and it can be strange. You see in like Zen stories and Tibetan stories, sometimes teachers use unusual or extraordinary means to teach their disciples. Well, there is humans to humans. But like it could be a sneeze, for instance, under
I
the
see.
various, right? Because sometimes a sneeze can be so violent, it does things to your energy body that you're kind of, there's a moment of suspense afterwards. Does that happen to anybody? Or maybe you don't sneeze like I do sometimes, but sometimes it's such a wah like that you're kind of up in space for a second before you resume normal activities. That's like what they call the space between thoughts. It's a moment where, for somebody, the Buddha mind could come through, where all of a sudden, before you return to the normal blah, blah, blah of your thoughts and feelings, you kind of get an insight into the space in which they happen. And then afterwards, it's never quite the same. There's a distance, you can't even call it a distance. It's just a new perspective on everything that's going on just because you sneezed. So it wasn't because a Dharma teacher says, teaches you how to sneeze so violently that something like this might happen. Somebody might not even be that much into Dharma, but then the sneeze would be under the various other things, as an example. It's not reading a sacred text. It's not a beautiful moment of Dharma. And it could be, for instance, a bereavement. Sometimes a bereavement can hit somebody so hard that, impermanence and what's it all about, really, what's life all about, that kind of thing can really speak to them in that moment. And it's not as though that's reinforced by a Dharma teacher saying, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, or, we're all mortal. It's just the reality itself brings you so much closer to the truth.
Yes, thank you.
And I saw you had a little text question about what are will days. It's not a Buddhist expression, will days. It's something that modern day Buddhists use, because in Buddhist calendars, on days when practice is supposed to be more potent, they often put a little wheel, Dharmacharya wheel, in the calendar. So they're new moon, full moon, and then other than that, sometimes it's 10th lunar day, 8th lunar day, 25th lunar day. And it's because of the interaction of, the moon, the cosmos, with our inner energy bodies. So usually they're days when we're more likely to be angry, more likely to be upset, days when our negativity can get the better of us. So those days we're encouraged to practice more. They're not blessed days, which people think of them as, these are will days, it's a blessing day for practice. When you look at the explanation, they're days you're more likely to be negative. And so please practice on those days, because then the negative urge, like to anger or jealousy or desire, can be turned into something that's quite positive.
Thank you. And all those different representations of the nirmanakaya that you talked about, do you know the Tibetan names for each of them?
But those 5,
Yeah.
offhand, no. I can't just rattle them off.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
No.
The first was Buddha and then Tulku.
Yeah, but they're not the Tibetan names. The first one, when you get the list of the 5, the first one is Chogi Tulku, Supreme Nirmanakaya. The second one, Jewi Tulku, it's called Reborn Nirmanakayas, which is the word like Yangtze these days. It's the reincarnation Nirmanakayas. I think, but I can't remember the technical names. They do have them. I mean, they do exist.
Ken, I was suddenly reminded of when you did your compost cosmos. I suddenly remembered a wonderful teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh called Roses and Garbage. How roses are garbage and garbage is roses. And that was a wonderful insight. Thank you.
Thank you. But don't quote me as saying the cosmos is garbage, right? But funny things happen to meditators. Sometimes what is delicious food can taste horrible. What will be horrible can taste delicious. And to test Mahamudra practices, sometimes they have to eat excrement. And so when Trungpa Rinpoche and Akon Rinpoche were still in Tibet with Khenpo Gangsha, one of the things they had to do, they were given shit to eat to see if they really tasted it as bliss or not. I mean, that's the real test. If you've got the accomplishment, it tastes as nice as, or whatever turns you on, the best porridge or banana split ice cream or whatever. There is, this really happens. I mean, there's a transformation. Pain can be blissful. Doing things, I remember one experience, if I can talk personally. I used to vomit a lot. I used to get these migraines that usually ended up with vomiting or fainting. Had them quite often. So I got very used to, I'm a very good vomiter, I'm very practiced in it. And this it's only a few weeks ago when I was still in re-education in hospital, and I got an infection, quite a severe infection. And so at first my whole body was shaking like a leaf. And it took a doctor and a nurse to hold down the arm so they could get a perfusion in to me. That's French perfusion, drip into me. But there was this whole team around me because I was in a bit of a state. And then at one point, I was going to vomit. And I knew one of the nurses there, she doesn't mind most situations, but she told me before, it's when they vomit, I can't take it. So I was thinking of this nurse, and I sort of, I think I'm going to vomit. And so, it's what they call projectile vomiting. It's very hard to hold it in. You really need to have to shut your mouth, a lot of pressure. But I managed to wait till somebody grabbed a rubbish bag, plastic bag, and managed to get it over with to me. Then I got everything into the bag. Nothing on the bed, nothing on the doctors or the nurses. I'm a very, very, very good vomiter. But I do remember, because of meditation, vomiting blissfully. It was just amazing. Normally you feel so wretched when you vomit. It was just all like, wow. It was so nice. It was totally perfect and blissful, and there's this stuff sort of coming out down the toilet. So nice, you know, one of the sort of deepest experiences you've ever had. Anyway, just rambling.
Ken, does that come under the various experiences?
Well, I didn't experience Buddha mind. It was just so pleasant. I mean, it was just so unexpectedly pleasant. I couldn't believe it. It didn't ought to be like this, because I vomited many times before, and normally before you get to the stage of actually being able to get it out, you really do feel awful. I mean, it's so awful, and so.
Thanks for the teachings today, Ken. There's been some really good stuff in that. In fact, it was, yet again, I feel I've got so much stuff to do to kind of reflect on, really. That it was almost too much, but really good. And that the section that you talked about, according to your circumstances, that one seems like a particular important thing to reflect on and really turn over a bit. So thanks for that prompt.
Yeah, good. Yeah, when you experience a Buddha in any of those, actually there we were looking at sambhogakaya, so we're just looking at what very pure bodhisattvas experience. But it's this thing about what they experience isn't what's there. How they experience Buddha isn't what Buddha is. But totally generated by their own needs. So that's us for today, and see you next week. Next week I'll try and do more verses. I think I've got off my chest all the things I wanted to say about this section, and we can go through the 12 deeds of the Buddha. And with a bit of luck, we might even finish this enlightenment section next week. Who knows? Take good care, and see you soon. We've done the dedication.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Ciao, Ken.
Perfect.
Ken.